Rocky Mountains. The mere mention of the words conjures up images of towering peaks, clear running streams, and golden autumns with the trees in all of their glory. In northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, the Rocky Mountains are all of these things, but there is also something more, for these mountains have a story to tell, a tale that is over 100 years in the making. It is the story of men and machines battling their ways over rugged passes and through deep canyons. This is narrow gauge railroad country. We're about to pay a visit to one of the finest preserved steam railroads in the entire world, the Cumbres Toltec Scenic Railroad. The rails for the Cumbres Toltec were first laid starting in 1880 and stretched for 64 miles between Antonito, Colorado and Chama, New Mexico. What a 64 miles it is! Every day the trains of the Cumbres Toltec traverse steep mountain grades, lofty bridges, deep canyons, tunnels, deserts, and sometimes even snow. And the neat thing about this railroad is that the trains are pulled by the very steam locomotives that have worked on this line for decades. So sit back and relax as we experience one of the rides of a lifetime. Morning in Chama, New Mexico finds a number of steam locomotives simmering away, waiting to go to work. Chama is one of the few railroad terminals in North America that is home to a fleet of steam engines. It's hard to find sights and sounds such as these anywhere else. The first train arrived here on December 31st, 1880. At that time, Chama became one of many such railroad towns on the rapidly expanding Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. Founded in 1870 by the Civil War hero General William Jackson Palmer, the Rio Grande was supposed to build a line between Denver and Mexico City, but for a number of reasons got diverted into the mountains of New Mexico and Colorado, never even reaching the Mexican border. General Palmer built the line to be narrow gauge, with 3 feet between the rails instead of the usual standard gauge of 4 feet 8 1/2 inches. In Antonito, one can see a display showing a piece of 3-rail track, which once accommodated trains of both gauges. The Rio Grande had a quite extensive system of narrow gauge trackage, although it began the process of closing the narrow gauge or converting it to standard gauge by the late 1890s. By the 1960s, the stretch of track running through Antonito and Chama was part of the very last of the narrow gauge in service, and the last place in North America that one could find long freight trains pulled by steam locomotives. In December of 1968, the last Rio Grande freight trains were run, and in 1970, the states of Colorado and New Mexico bought the narrow gauge between Antonito and Chama, creating today's Cumbres and Toltec. The wisdom of saving the railroad becomes evident every morning as the locomotives are awakened. Steam locomotives have been going about this same ritual here for over 100 years. The first stop for the engines after leaving the back shop is the ash pit, where the previous night's clinkers are dumped out. Once the ashes have been dumped, the locomotive moves up to the double-spouted water tank. The tender holds over 5,000 gallons of water, and it will need every drop to make it up the steep mountain grade. The steam locomotives on the Cumbres and Toltec burn coal, and for decades the wooden coaling tower has provided it. The operation of this device is quite interesting. Gondola cars of coal are unloaded over a chute. Then, buckets scoop up the coal and hoist it to the top of the coal bin and dump it in. Then the locomotive is positioned underneath it, and the coal is loaded into the tender. The railroad yard in Chama is quite literally one of our national treasures, as it has changed very little from its appearance in the 1930s. The oldest structure here is the log bunkhouse, erected at the beginning of the railroad in 1880. The depot was built in 1889, replacing the original, which was destroyed in a fire that year. A 9-stall roundhouse was also constructed that year to replace an earlier one, and 2 bays remain today. The unique double-spouted water tank was constructed in 1897. Most railroad yards had a warehouse or two, and so does Chama. The most prominent structure located here is the wooden coaling tower, which was erected in 1924. At the west end of the yard are the old stock pens. This entire setting is made complete by a collection of operating wooden freight cars that, like the locomotives, have served this very railroad for decades. There are 10 steam locomotives on the railroad, and at the time this program was produced, 6 of them were in service. Number 463 was built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1903. Numbers 484, 487, 488, and 489 were built by Baldwin in 1925. Number 497 was built by Baldwin as a standard gauge locomotive in 1902 and was converted to narrow gauge in 1930. All of these locomotives are known as 282s to students of railroad history. One question people new to the narrow gauge often have concerns the wheels of these locomotives, which seem to flail about. Most people are more familiar with steam locomotives such as this one, where the wheels can be easily seen. These engines, on the other hand, have the wheels inside the locomotive's frame, while the counterweights are mounted outside the frame. This arrangement allows the locomotive to be larger, while still being able to run on narrow gauge track. The old-time flavor of the Chama yard extends to the adjacent downtown area as well, with many buildings that have been here for many years. By mid-morning, the passengers are boarding the train. And depending on the size of the train, there will be 1, 2, or even 3 steam locomotives on the point. Like a great ship waiting to sail, the passengers are filled with a sense of anticipation, waiting for the whistle blast that signaled the start of their journey. Shortly after leaving Chama, at an elevation of 7,863 feet, our train begins the steep 4% grade up to the summit of Cumbres Pass at an elevation of 10,015 feet and only 12 miles away. Our train is stopping at Lobato, New Mexico. Here, the helper locomotive will be uncoupled to cross Lobato Trestle by itself. The load limit for the bridge does not permit 2 of these locomotives to be on the structure at the same time. Lobato Trestle is 100 feet above Wolf Creek. Once across the bridge, the locomotives recouple, and we are again on our way. Our train has just crossed into Colorado at the Cresco Water Station. Although most trains on the Cumbres and Toltec run during the summer, sometimes trains such as this freight train run when there is snow on the ground. We're going to ride a special passenger train through this area in the snow as well. When this track was owned by the Rio Grande Railroad, it ran year-round and often had to be opened with a rotary snowplow. The Cumbres Toltec still maintains two of the old steam-powered rotaries. Here we see rotary OY as it opens up the line during the month of May. We've rejoined our passenger train as it makes its final assault on Cumbres Pass. Just before reaching the summit, the train rounds Windy Point, where passengers can see almost all the way back to Chama. An hour after leaving Chama, the train at last attains the summit of Cumbres Pass. At an elevation of 10,015 feet, Cumbres is the highest station on the railroad. Here at Cumbres Pass, a visitor can see several historic buildings, including the section house, car inspector's house, and part of the old snow shed. All of these structures have been restored by the volunteer group called the Friends of the Cumbres Toltec. The Friends have been steadily restoring buildings and railroad cars over the entire railroad. Once our train has reached the summit, the helper locomotive is removed, and the train continues on to the lunch stop at Osier. We'll catch this train on its return trip. For now, let's head to Antonito to see the other side of the railroad. Although many people focus on the train out of Chama and the climb to Cumbres Pass, many people say the best scenery on the railroad is to be found on the train that departs Antonito. Antonito is a small farming community in Colorado's San Luis Valley. It is a typical small town and blends with the character of the railroad very well. At Antonito, the Cumbres Toltec maintains a small depot that serves the needs of today's passengers. Although built in an old-time railroad style, it was constructed by the Cumbres Toltec. The original Denver and Rio Grande depot is located in downtown Antonito and is constructed with stones of lava which were excavated from the roadbed as the railroad was built. The tracks on the left were once the narrow gauge line to Santa Fe, while those to the right went to Chama in points west. This part of the Antonito yard was not sold to the two states, as the standard gauge to the north is still in service. As this program was being produced, the future of this final building was very much in doubt. As is the case in Chama, the passengers scurry aboard the train, waiting for today's adventure to begin. From Antonito, which is at an elevation of 7,888 feet, the railroad will climb a gradual 1.4% grade to Osier, and then all the way to the 10,015-foot Cumbres Pass. Unlike the other end of the railroad, the area around Antonito is arid and flat. Passengers get the distinct feeling that they are departing on a trip straight into the Wild West. To the left of the train is Mount San Antonio, an extinct volcano. The train is nearing a bridge known as Ferguson's Trestle. A man of the same name was supposedly hanged from here in the early days of the railroad. Here we cross into New Mexico. The railroad will crisscross the border 9 more times between here and Cumbres Pass. Although it's hard for the passengers to tell, the train has been steadily climbing since it left Antonito. Soon we will leave the San Luis Valley behind and pass the old water station at Lava, New Mexico. The train is steadily climbing and is already 1,000 feet higher than when it started in Antonito. The surveyors in 1880 found some interesting ways to keep a steady grade when they ran into obstacles. Near Bighorn, the train will traverse a hillside with the track on 3 different levels. This is called Whiplash Curve. Once past Whiplash Curve, the scenery is definitely changing. The sagebrush is giving way to ponderosa pine and aspens. Off to the left, we see Bighorn Peak. Miles west of Bighorn, the railroad enters one of its most scenic areas, overlooking the beautiful Los Pinos Valley. train has just arrived at Sublette, New Mexico, at an elevation of 9,276 feet. Here, the locomotive's water supply is replenished by the old standpipe. Sublette is an abandoned section camp where track workers and their families once lived. This town site has been completely restored by the Friends of the Cumbres Toltec. Here we see the difference between 1988 and 1998. In addition to their work on the historic buildings, the Friends of the Cumbres Toltec also maintain the fleet of historic freight cars. From time to time, the railroad runs a freight train for the benefit of photographers who are able to get images straight from the railroad's past. We're back at Sublette as our passenger train continues on its way. From here on, the scenery becomes more spectacular by the mile as we enjoy the trip through the Los Pinos Valley and Toltec Gorge. Here we get our first view of Toltec Gorge. We're going through the first of two tunnels, called Mud Tunnel due to the fact that the tunnel was dug through soft volcanic ash and mud. This location is known as Phantom Curve. The shadows cast from the locomotive headlights by these rock formations reminded early railroaders of ghosts. One of the highlights of the trip is the passage through Toltec Gorge. The train plunges into Rock Tunnel, then upon exiting, the passengers will immediately look 600 feet down to the Los Pinos River. Just past Rock Tunnel, the train passes the monument to President James Garfield. A memorial service was held in this spot in 1881 for the recently assassinated president. The scenery begins to change again as the valley widens between here and our lunch stop at Osier. At Osier, Colorado, the train from Antonito and the train from Chama meet each other and stop for lunch. Osier, at an elevation of 9,637 feet, was another section camp, and here the old water tank, section house, and depot had been preserved. A new dining hall built in 1989 serves today's passengers. After lunch, the two trains return to their respective terminals. We're back on board the Chama train as it continues the climb back up to Cumbres Pass. As rugged as this railroad is, it was constructed with only two large bridges. Here we cross 137-foot-high Cascade Trestle, the tallest bridge on the railroad. At Los Pinos, the railroad makes a large horseshoe curve, then stops for water. From Los Pinos, our train climbs the final few miles up to Cumbres. Just before Cumbres, the railroad makes nearly a complete circle at what is known today as Tanglefoot Curve, or the Cumbres Loop in the old days. This is another elevation gaining trick used by the surveyors in 1880. Our train is once again arriving at 10,015-foot Cumbres Pass. What goes up must come down, and now the Chama train begins the steep descent down the 4% grade. An hour after leaving the station at Cumbres, our train arrives back in Chama. At the other end of the line, the Antonito train is about to call it a day as well. We hope that you've enjoyed your video visit to the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad, and that you'll visit southern Colorado and northern New Mexico to ride it for yourself. We're sure that you'll agree that this is one of the finest preserved steam railroads to be found anywhere.
locomotive.